After a Detroit man viciously attacked a 75-year-old veteran in a nursing home while videoing the horrific event, the elderly man was pronounced dead 2 months later. The attacker has since learned his fate. It is hard to forget the images from the viral video of Jaden Hayden pummeling an elderly man in a nursing home. That elderly man was a veteran, later identified as Norman Bledsoe. Hayden had been sent to the nursing home because he had tested positive for COVID-19 and was part of a Michigan health official's policy that sent some COVID-positive patients to quarantine in area nursing homes. The video of the assault on Bledsoe was very graphic and disturbing. See this BHSNR here? The suspect said, grabbing the camera to show the victim's bloodied face. "Get the FK off my bed, NR." The suspect paused momentarily to wipe the elderly man's blood off with a white sheet. "FK wrong with you?" Hayden asked just before the video ended. The Army veteran died 2 months after the horrific attack, leaving many to question whether the beating played a large part in his death. His eating habits went downhill after the assault, and he lost quite a bit of weight, Norman Bledsoe's nephew, Kevin Bledsoe, told the Detroit News. Norman Bledsoe suffered 4 broken fingers, broken ribs, and a broken jaw from the attack, and the attack even got a rebuke from former President Donald Trump in the White House. At the time of his arrest, the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office said Hayden was charged with 2 counts of assault, larceny, and stealing a financial transaction device. After years of waiting to hear when the trial would start against Hayden, the court decided to dismiss all charges. Marty Hayden, the father of John Hayden, said his son is autistic, suffers from schizophrenia, and that he has a history of assaultive behavior, Waxes reported. The court claimed they found Hayden incompetent to stand trial. He shouldn't be in prison, John Hayden's father said, adding that if his son had been convicted and sent to prison, it would have only worsened his mental health issues. Kevin Bledsoe didn't have kind words for his uncle's attacker at the time of the assault. "We going to crush you like a grape. It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time," the victim's nephew declared. It's unclear if the family feels differently now, after learning that Hayden was admitted into the nursing facility thanks to Michigan's policy, and many blame Gov. Gretchen Whitmer for the horrendous event. During the case of Jaden Hayden, the prosecutors made sure the court dismissed his case without prejudice, which means they can bring charges at a later date. If Hayden steps out of line and becomes a danger to the public again, they can reissue the charges. Meanwhile, the victim's family has filed a lawsuit against the nursing home, which many argue should have known better than to place a schizophrenic young man in the same room as an elderly patient. That may be of little comfort to the family of Norman Bledsoe, who had to endure watching their loved one suffer abuse and then lose his life a short time later. While no one wants to see a seriously mentally ill individual who has no recollection or control of his actions go to prison, neither does society condone using the insanity defense if the person truly understands right from wrong. What we can agree on is that the nursing home, as well as the Michigan health officials who enacted a policy that allowed this to happen, should have known better. The tragic case of Norman Bledsoe highlights significant concerns about the handling of mentally ill individuals in medical and care facilities. Critics argue that placing a young man with known violent tendencies in a nursing home with vulnerable elderly patients was reckless, exposing a flaw in the system that prioritizes expedient solutions over safety. The decision to move COVID-19 patients into nursing homes, especially without proper screening for behavioral issues, remains a controversial policy with devastating consequences. Many people have questioned why the state of Michigan failed to create a more secure facility for COVID-positive patients who also had mental health conditions. Rather than placing individuals like Jaden Hayden in environments designed for proper psychiatric care, officials opted for a hasty solution that ultimately led to disaster. In hindsight, this tragic event serves as a painful reminder of what happens when policies are rushed without fully considering the ramifications. Legal experts have also weighed in on the dismissal of charges against Hayden. While it is true that individuals deemed incompetent cannot be held criminally responsible in the same way as others, some argue that a more thorough review should have been conducted before making such a decision. The court's ruling effectively means Hayden will not face any punishment for his actions, leaving many questioning if justice was truly served. The victim's family continues to push for accountability, not just from the nursing home but also from state officials. Many believe that Norman Bledsoe's death was not just the result of an isolated act of violence, but rather a systemic failure that placed him in harm's way. His relatives have expressed frustration at the lack of consequences for those responsible for the circumstances leading to the attack. Adding to the controversy, some have pointed out the role of the media in covering the case. While the attack itself gained widespread attention due to the disturbing video, The follow-up regarding Hayden's release and the lack of charges received comparatively less coverage. Critics argue that cases like this, which involve policy failures, deserve just as much attention as the initial act of violence. If there are also concerns about what happens next with Jayden Hayden. If he remains untreated or is released without supervision, there is a risk of further incidents. Those familiar with Hayden's history of violent outbursts worry that he could pose a danger to others if not placed in an appropriate psychiatric facility. His father has insisted that his son needs care, not punishment, but many remain skeptical about whether he will receive the necessary treatment. Meanwhile, the nursing home industry has faced renewed scrutiny following this incident. Advocates for elderly care argue that there should be stricter regulations to prevent similar tragedies. Allowing a young, mentally ill man with a history of violence to be placed among elderly residents was, in their view, an egregious oversight that should never have occurred. In response to mounting criticism, Michigan officials have attempted to defend their policies, claiming that decisions were made under extreme circumstances during the height of the pandemic. However, for many, this explanation does little to alleviate concerns. The argument that state officials were simply following emergency protocols does not absolve them of responsibility for the suffering endured by victims like Norman Bledsoe. For the Bledsoe family, the pain of losing their loved one is compounded by the knowledge that his attacker walks free. So while they understand that mental illness played a role in Hayden's actions, they struggle to reconcile this with the brutal reality of what their family member endured. Their pursuit of justice continues, even as the legal system appears to have failed them. Ultimately, this case raises broader questions about how society balances mental health issues with public safety. While it is crucial to provide care for those struggling with mental illness, it is equally important to ensure that they do not pose a risk to others. In the wake of this tragedy, many hope that changes will be made to prevent similar incidents in the future, but for Norman Bledsoe and his grieving family, those changes have come too late. But as the debate continues, many wonder whether this case will set a precedent for how similar incidents are handled in the future. If individuals with severe mental illnesses can commit violent acts and avoid legal consequences due to incompetency rulings, it raises concerns about public safety and accountability. While compassion for mental illness is necessary, there must also be safeguards to prevent further harm both to the individuals struggling with their conditions and to innocent victims like Norman Bledsoe. The Bledsoe family remains determined to keep Norman's story alive, not just for justice but to push for systemic changes that could prevent such tragedies. Advocacy groups have joined their calls for stricter policies on placing mentally ill patients in care facilities, emphasizing the need for thorough evaluations and specialized placements. For now, the memory of Norman Bledsoe serves as both a painful reminder and a rallying cry for reform, ensuring that no other family has to endure the same heartbreaking loss.